Hello, everyone. We're going to get started pretty soon in our last installment of our September Lightning Talk series. But first, did you go anywhere fun? I know you probably don't have time for a vacation given all the work that you do, but anything exciting at least this summer?
Yeah, I wish I had a better or a fun story to share about something this summer, but I did actually. I went to Legoland, and that was a little bit. It was better than I thought it would be.
Okay,
Yeah,
that actually sounds kind of fun. I've
yeah,
I mean, yeah, okay. Where is Legoland? Is that in California?
yeah. It is. It's down in Carlsbad, so just
Oh,
north of San Diego.
nice. Okay. I would count that as my summer fun.
Yeah,
Well, we're not going to have as much fun as Legoland, but maybe so in our talk here. But so thanks everyone for coming. Like I said, this is the last installment in our Lightning Talk series, and we're focusing on data-driven management. And this event is sponsored by SCRATCHPAD. I'll drop a little link to SCRATCHPAD there. It's the easiest way to update and manage your pipeline in Salesforce, and you can get started in about 30 seconds. So our lightning talk formats are a little bit different than our standard digital events. We pulled together some really awesome minds from all over the place to talk about developing a data-driven mindset, all the way to metrics for growth and alignment. And we spend about 20 minutes with each of our folks, picking their brains about how to be awesome data-driven leaders. And today we're going to be talking about the right metrics for growth and alignment. And this event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to help community members answer questions they might otherwise struggle to answer on their own. We have an awesome online forum, and we have cool standard digital events like you're at here today. And if you like some of the content, you're going to love the content from our summit that's happening next week, which is so wild that it's happening so soon. We're going to be talking about annual planning and the people and the process and the technology that you need to get ready for 2022, which is so soon. But enough about MSP, let's get back to today. So we have metrics and data genius Pouyan here to talk to us about.
I don't think I've ever seen that word
I made it up, so I
associated
hope
with
you
me,
liked it.
but thank you.
Well, welcome. Can you, sirens are coming. It's New York, so I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. My name is Pouyan Salehi. I'm the founder and the CEO, or co-founder and CEO at SCRATCHPAD, and previously at PersistIQ, where I was the co-founder and CEO as well. I don't think I've ever seen genius associated with like even being close to my name. So thank you for that. But yeah, I have some experience around metrics and data and alignment in building two companies, and both at the very founding stages, but also building the teams around them and growing them. So hopefully, can share a few of my learnings that might be beneficial to you all listening.
Awesome. Excited to have you here. I'm in Brooklyn, so we're constantly getting, the sirens in the ambulance. So you stopped just in time.
Nice.
This is what we're going to be talking about today, the right metrics for growth and alignment. And we'll be covering two here. We're going to talk about the most important metrics and then how to evaluate those metrics. We love our events to be super engaging and interactive. So if you have any questions for us, please pop them into the Q&A chat, or you can hang out with us in the Zoom chat, give us your best jokes, tell us where you went, if you went to Legoland or anything like that. So let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Basically, what we've talked about so far in our series is we talked about building a data-driven mindset. So Pete gave us the lowdown on that. And then Brad Smith took us through how to build that mindset into our leadership. And then last week, Dawn was able to take all of those mindsets, those behaviors, and drop them into automation. Like, how do we automate with that data-drivenness in mind? And you're going to be talking to us about metrics. So what metrics are we using for alignment and for growth? What data do we use to even get started with that?
Yeah, it's a pretty broad question. So let me maybe start by sharing some context on how you even get to the metrics, because I could throw some metrics out that we track at SCRATCHPAD, but they're different than what we did at Persist. And they might be different. I would bet that they'd be different for any folks on listening here. So, I basically assume that I start with the assumption that you can track anything that you want and assume that you can get any data that you want. Now, maybe that might not be the case, but just work with me and go with that assumption for a second. The important piece is to start with your go-to-market motion first. And what I mean by that is try to understand, how is it that your business is going to grow in the first place? How are you delivering the product and the services? How are you capturing revenue? How are you going to keep that? And I think that's important now because, as I'm sure a lot of folks are hearing, there's all buzzwords around PLG and bottom-up growth, but there's still the top-down approach and all these different approaches. And I think understanding what the approach is that works for your company, or that you may even want to experiment with if you're just getting started, is really critical, because that then, at least for me, informs what metrics to track, and more importantly on the alignment piece. So again, a lot of what I'll share is from the perspective of what we're doing at SCRATCHPAD, some of the stuff I could share at PersistIQ. For context, at SCRATCHPAD, we do have primarily a bottom-up approach. And so what that means is individual salespeople, folks on the revenue team are signing up for SCRATCHPAD, starting to use it, and it just grows organically. And then at that point, our sales motions kick in. We'll get a customer, we support the customer, we go through renewals, we go through expansion. So it's simplified at a very high level. That's the background that I come with there. And in terms of the metrics themselves, one of the things that I try to do is make sure that I've got breadth in the early days that to capture the entire go-to-market motion. And one of the pitfalls I've made, and I've seen other folks make, is you'll go very deep on one part. Let's say opportunity progression or top of funnel pipeline development. And what'll happen is you'll go very deep and you'll come up with maybe 5, 6 different metrics to help inform that piece. But what you do then is you lose sight of how all the pieces fit together. And just in my experience, what I've learned is in the early days, you want to make sure that there's great alignment in your entire go-to-market motion, because it's not any one of those things that will make you successful. And so what we've done here at SCRATCHPAD, and it's helped us, is get that breadth and then try to come up with just one metric for each one of those, and have one metric that tells the story for that one piece. And that way it's easier to process it all. And it's easier to spot high level issues and say, okay, roughly speaking, is this part of the business working? Where might need some help, or what's going exceptionally well? Now, you certainly won't be able to do a ton of analysis or go deep on it. And that's okay, because early on, you're just trying to get some momentum built. But it's a lot easier to go deeper on the metrics once you have an understanding of how all the pieces fit together.
I love that. You also just answered 2 reg questions, actually. People were asking how to stay focused when there's so much data, and then how to prioritize. And you just answered both of them. That's awesome. And then I'm wondering how you start evaluating that data. I know this might be going too far into the second question, so I don't want to jump ahead, but did you have anything else you want to talk about in that first piece?
Yeah, I think, those are great questions, because again, if you go back to the underlying assumption I'm making, which is you can track anything and access the data, then and I think that's become more realistic now. There's so many great tools and systems out there that help you track just a ton of data. Years ago, that wasn't the case. And so you kind of just went with whatever you could get. But then if you go in with that assumption, it's really okay, cool. I'm not going to have time to process everything. Right. And so that's a question I ask myself, is what is it that I'm actually going to pay attention to? And in terms of prioritizing and coming back and how we use the data, one of the things that we do regularly is just assess, have we been looking at this data recently? Has this data, or, what we thought was important, helped us inform our thinking? Has it helped answer any questions, spot any issues? And if it hasn't, then just get rid of it. Now, we have a core value at our company at SCRATCHPAD. Number one value is simplicity. And so we live by it. This is one of the ways that we live by it. But I think it's being able to let go of it and say, you know what, if we need it later, we'll come back, we'll track it. But just knowing what, constantly reassessing that and not being afraid to let go has certainly helped us, because it just reduces the noise and it helps you focus on the right areas of the business.
That's interesting that you say that, because that's come up in every single one of our talks here. Brad Smith brought up, change is going to be constant. You're going to have to adapt to change. And each of you have said that in your own words. I think that's fantastic. You were talking about that breadth that folks should have. And someone asked if there's any North Star metrics that sales orgs should be reporting on and using. So is there any typical ones that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in sales and you're not tracking revenue, that's a problem, I'd say. I'm kidding. Um, there's it comes back to what to the person that asked that question. I'd say, okay, well, what are the nuances within your sales organization? What does that velocity look like? How are accounts developed? And you may not know those answers if you're just getting started, or let's say if you're changing up your process, and that's okay, but make the best guess that you can.
Mhm.
And so obviously revenue is a really big one, but just unpacking how do you get that revenue, and then how do you keep that revenue? And so you can break that out a little bit. But I think for sales itself, revenue it's a lagging indicator. And so what you want to look for is try to get as much signal as you can throughout the life cycle, not just all the way at the top, right? But how much how much signal can you get upfront that would be a leading indicator to, do we, for example, have not even a pipeline? Do we have even, in our case would be, have we had enough accounts that have signed up for us to even have a shot at hitting our number?
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, great, we have that coverage. So now what we need to do is work on getting those accounts developed such that they become opportunities. And then once we have those opportunities, progressing them through the funnel enough so that we can actually get customers. And, so I don't know if there's any one metric.
Yeah.
Again, I think in our case, at least, alignment is so important that it's important to be able to track that entire funnel.
Yeah, interesting. And when you're talking about, I mean, you mentioned how you're evaluating those metrics. What are some big red flags to look out for that it's time for a change? I think you brought up, there's some key questions to ask yourself.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's as simple as if you've started out, let's say at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the quarter, and you say, okay, these are like the 6 metrics that we're going to track. We set them up, we're tracking them. But if you just stop and go back, let's say at the end of the quarter, and say, have we even talked about this metric? Okay, great. We're tracking it and we talk about it. It's in, let's say, our weekly stand-up or whatever it is. But how has that metric helped us? What has it helped inform? What decisions have we made off of that? And if there isn't much there, then it just turns into a vanity metric. And my style for that is usually just to get rid of it.
Okay, that's great. And you kind of already answered this question, but I thought it was a key one as well. How do you even know if your data is accurate and good enough to be analyzed?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a lot to unpack there, but I would say, it starts with understanding the source of the data. So, at SCRATCHPAD, we have different types of data that we analyze. One of them would be product usage data. Mm-hmm. And so we try to, then just go back and understand, how are you capturing that data in the first place? Do you have sufficient quality? And then do you have enough of it to even analyze it? And that I think is important too, because then you can spot issues if something breaks, and stuff breaks all the time. You may, maybe in one of your code releases, you stop tracking an event, your metrics go down. You're like, wait a minute, that doesn't align with what we're seeing in customer conversations. Maybe something is broken there. But I think understanding the source of the data, how that data is captured, and then knowing that, no data is perfect, and leaving that space for, okay, are we relying on this data to be the absolute truth and tell us what to do? Or is it just directionally telling us, hey, look over here, there might be an issue.
Okay, that's fantastic. And how often are you evaluating and looking at all of that?
I'd say constantly. Some of the things like we set very early on, and they have not changed in the 2 years that we've been running. Other things we're changing on a quarterly basis.
Okay. And if you're an early stage startup, what would be your best advice for kind of getting this off the ground? You've given us like the biggest advice you can think of, but what about some best practices or some tactical tips?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we just talked about, which is, can you trust your data in the first place to get any signal out of it? So, let's break it down. So if you probably want some product usage data if you're any sort of end user focused product or company. And so again, do you have great event tracking done? And sometimes it feels like, okay, we need to ship products so that customers use it. But one of the things we did early on is make sure that with any new feature that we were developing, we also had a plan around how we're going to track its performance. And so we made sure that there was proper event tracking, how we were going to look at that, and would almost build the dashboard for how we would look at product usage or that feature usage in advance of actually shipping it. So that's on that side. On the go-to-market side, make sure that you're logging the information that you need. I mean, that's going to be a lot more manual, especially as you're progressing deals through. And this is one where I would not overcomplicate it. I've seen folks that are just getting started build out their Salesforce instance, add a ton of fields, implement a huge methodology, and it's like, just you're trying to move fast. Keep it simple. Make sure you track just the core things that you care about, even in terms of the stages that you develop. Right? Maybe start with fewer stages so it's easier to track, but then just make sure that folks are actually doing that. And obviously, I guess shameless plug, like SCRATCHPAD helps with that. It reduces all the drag. But I think making sure you have coverage on that side as well. Once you have the coverage and you have the confidence, then you can go in and say, okay, how do we take the data, report on it, and then make decisions.
Awesome. I think you've answered so many of our questions that folks had for us in a really quick way. So this is definitely a lightning talk. One last question I wanted to give you before you want to add anything else.
Mhm.
I've asked every one of our speakers this so far. What is the most unlikely but helpful data set you've used?
Wow. Okay. Unlikely but helpful data set that I've used. I have to actually think about that for a second. I'll say this. I don't know if this is unlikely, but it's one that we set early on as our North Star. Just given the dynamics of the type of product that we're building and the type of business we're trying to build. And I think for anyone listening, this is the other piece that I would encourage is, are there certain things that must be true or must hold for you to have something of substance as a product or as a business? And for us, it was simply retention, end user retention. And the reason we backed into that is because there's a graveyard of companies and tools that have been built for salespeople and connected to Salesforce. And a lot of them had similar functionality. They had tried certain things, but they had mostly failed because they just failed at adoption. And so we identified that as the thing that we must get right. And so we tracked that, we obsessed over it. I look at that on a daily basis. And there have been some interesting observations that have come out of that over time of just looking at it. So I know it's not a direct answer to your question, but hopefully it's helpful nonetheless.
No, it definitely is. And I think it's kind of full circle, everything that you've said, everything that each of our speakers have said as well. It's just getting that right data and then making sure that you're using it properly and not getting bogged down by it. If anyone else has any questions, please let us know in the chat or the Q&A, but I'd love to get like a key takeaway from you. If you had to tweet out something about everything we just talked about, how would you tweet it out?
Simplicity wins.
Wow.
Even in data, even in tracking. And I actually did come up with an answer to your question. The unlikely data that's most helpful. I was thinking about that the whole time. Email response time.
Okay.
I have seen that is a great predictor of, I wouldn't necessarily say sales performance on winning, but it's a great indicator or leading indicator of folks that may be struggling or may not be a fit. Writing that down.
That's awesome. All right, that's a great answer. Well, I think that's it. I didn't see any more questions in the chat. I'm going to pop up my screen again and just thank you so much for your time. This is fantastic. This is the end of our lightning talk series. I think you were the perfect end for it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we let folks go?
No, good luck.
Okay. Also, I love the shirt. All right. Thank you everyone so much for joining. We hope you enjoyed our lightning series talk. This was super lightning fast and we had a great time. Enjoy the rest of your days or evenings.
All right. Thanks everyone.
Bye.